Growing up, it did not take a genius to figure out who my mother's favorite was. It was my younger brother, Jake. She never openly admitted it, but her actions made it painfully obvious. She doted on him, praised him endlessly, and defended him no matter what. It was as if he could do no wrong. Meanwhile, I was the responsible one. If anything went wrong, even if I was not involved somehow, it was always my fault. Take the vase incident, for example. Mom had this expensive vase she cherished, always going on about how it was a family heirloom. One day, Jake, who was about 8 at the time, broke it while kicking a soccer ball in the house. I was upstairs doing my homework when I heard the crash. Before I could even reach the scene, Mom was already yelling at me. "Why were you not watching him, Daniel? You are older. You should have stopped him." I tried to defend myself, but it was pointless. Jake stood there with his best remorseful face, and that was all it took for her to let him off the hook. Instead, she turned all her fury on me, ranting about how I needed to set a better example. I did not even bother arguing. What was the point? But it was not just about taking the blame. Jake also got all the praise. Whenever I achieved something, it was met with a lukewarm acknowledgement at best. In 5th grade, I won a citywide math competition. I came home with my little trophy, beaming, ready to share the good news. Mom glanced at it and said, "Good job, Daniel," before turning back to cooking. A few months later, Jake got a participation ribbon in a soccer tournament, and you would have thought he had won the World Cup. Mom threw a pizza party, invited relatives and neighbors, and celebrated like it was the greatest thing ever. When I asked her why she never did anything for my math win, she simply said, "Jake needs encouragement." You are older. You do not need that kind of attention. As for my dad, he stayed quiet through all of it. It was not that he did not care. He would give me these small, knowing smiles whenever Mom went overboard, but he never defended me. Maybe he was afraid of upsetting her. Maybe he just did not know how to handle her intensity. Either way, his silence made one thing clear. I was on my own. The favoritism did not fade as we got older. If anything, it became more pronounced. When I got into a prestigious university with a full scholarship, a result of years of hard work and sacrifice, Mom barely reacted. She did not even come to see me off. I packed up my life, got on a bus alone, and set up my dorm room by myself. It stung, but I told myself it was okay. I did not need her approval. Then, a few years later, Jake got into a local community college, and Mom acted like it was the greatest achievement in history. She threw him a huge party, complete with balloons, cake, and a slideshow of his high school memories. As if that was not enough, they even bought him a used car as a congratulatory gift. I could not believe it. I had to bike 5 miles to my part-time job throughout high school and save every penny just to afford my textbooks. When I asked her why they never helped me, Mom's response was simple. "You were independent, Daniel. You did not need our help. Jake's situation is different." Jake's situation included dropping out after 1 semester. But did Mom care? Not one bit. "He is just figuring out what he wants to do," she said. "He will find his way." Meanwhile, I was working 2 jobs, studying full-time, and barely making ends meet. I never asked them for help again. I already knew what the answer would be. Over the years, Jake bounced from one failed venture to another. He started an online store that went bankrupt in a few months, attempted to develop an app but never finished it, and even tried selling sports memorabilia. Another flop. And every time, Mom bailed him out. She invested in his schemes, reassured him that he just needed to find himself, and acted like he was some undiscovered genius. When I confronted her about it, she snapped. "He is talented, Daniel. He just has not found his groove yet. We are his family. We have to support him. I never got that kind of support. I never asked for much, but even when I did, the response was always the same. You are strong. You can handle it yourself. By the time I graduated, I was carrying a mountain of resentment. I wanted to believe that my success would finally make her see me, but it never did. Every accomplishment of mine was overshadowed by Jake's failures. My mother's relentless need to support Jake was not just favoritism, it made me feel invisible. No matter how hard I tried, it was never enough. I could win awards, land a great job, and be completely self-sufficient, but none of it mattered. Jake was always the priority. My father's inaction stung just as much, if not more. I knew he saw what was happening. He was not blind. But he never stood up for me, never told my mother she was being unfair. His silence felt like a betrayal. Looking back, I think I stayed quiet because I did not know how to fight it. What do you do when your own mother does not see your worth? When your father does not defend you? I thought if I worked hard enough, achieved enough, it would change something. But it never did. By the time Emma came into my life, I was exhausted, tired of fighting for recognition, tired of trying to prove that I mattered. I did not realize it at the time, but meeting her was like grabbing onto a lifeline. For the first time in my life, someone saw me for who I was, not for who I was supposed to be. I met Emma at a party I almost skipped. Jake had been pestering me for days. Come on, Daniel. You are so boring. Live a little. I had just come off a grueling double shift at work, and the last thing I wanted was to be surrounded by Jake's loud, rowdy friends. But for some reason, in a rare moment of letting my guard down, I went. The party was exactly the kind of chaos Jake thrived in. Blaring music, people spilling drinks, a haze of cigarette smoke hanging in the air. I stayed near the edge of the room, nursing a beer and counting down the minutes until I could leave unnoticed. That was when I saw her. Emma was standing by the kitchen counter, laughing at something someone had said. She had this effortless way of commanding attention without even trying. It was not just her smile. It was her energy, her warmth. She looked up, caught my eye, and gave me a small, curious smile. I am not the type to make the first move, but something about her made me feel braver than usual. I walked over, feeling awkward as ever. Hey, I am Daniel, Jake's older brother. She raised an eyebrow, amused. Jake has an older brother? She said playfully. He never mentioned you. I chuckled. That does not surprise me. I am usually in the background. We started talking, and before I knew it, the party faded into the background. We talked about everything, our jobs, our favorite books, the dumb movies we loved as kids. Emma was smart, funny, and so easy to talk to. By the end of the night, I felt like I had known her my whole life. Before she left, I asked for her number. She grinned, scribbled it on a napkin, and handed it to me. Do not make me regret this, she teased. Our first date was at a small coffee shop. I was nervous, but Emma put me at ease immediately. She had this way of making you feel like the most important person in the world. I could not believe someone like her was interested in me. Things moved quickly after that, but not in a chaotic way. Everything felt natural, like it was meant to be. Movie nights turned into lazy Sunday mornings, and before long, I asked her to move in with me. Living with Emma was the happiest I had ever been. She made our small apartment feel like a home. We would stay up late, talking about our dreams and plans for the future. For the first time, I felt like I had someone in my corner, someone who truly saw me, not the version of me my mother and Jake had defined. After a year of living together, I started thinking about proposing. I saved up for months, cutting back on everything I could. The ring was not extravagant, Just a simple platinum band with a small diamond, but it was exactly her style. On our 4th anniversary, I planned the perfect moment. We went for a walk in the park where we had our first date. My hands were shaking as I got down on one knee, but when I saw Emma's face light up with a smile, every doubt disappeared. "Yes," she said, before I even finished asking. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had something Jake could not take away from me, something that was mine. When we announced our engagement, I was hopeful. I thought maybe this would finally be the moment my family would celebrate something I had done. Mom's reaction was underwhelming, to say the least. "Well, congratulations, I guess," she said with a forced smile. Dad mumbled, "Good luck," like he was half distracted. And Jake? He just stood in the corner with a strange expression on his face. It was not happiness. It was something else, something I could not quite place at the time. After that, Jake started spending more time around Emma. At first, I did not think much of it. He was always the charmer, the one who could make people laugh. I figured he was just being himself. But as time went on, his comments started to bother me. "You are lucky to have her," he would say with a smirk. "I mean, I do not know how she puts up with you, but good for you." Emma would laugh it off. "He is just kidding," she would say. "Do not let it bother you." But it did bother me. Jake's presence started to feel intrusive. He would show up unannounced, stay too long, and ask Emma questions that felt a little too personal. "Are you sure Daniel is the right guy for you?" he asked her once, half joking. Emma brushed it off, but I could not shake the unease. I did not want to seem paranoid, so I kept quiet. Looking back, I wish I had said something sooner. Maybe it would not have made a difference, but at least I would not have been so blindsided by what came next. After the engagement, life did not feel as settled as it had before. At first, I thought it was just the stress of planning a wedding. Emma and I had decided to save up and pay for everything ourselves. We were both working long hours, skipping vacations, and making sacrifices to make it happen. I figured the pressure was getting to both of us. But something about Emma's behavior started to change. It was not immediate, subtle at first. She became quieter, more withdrawn. She used to tell me everything about her day, but now her answers felt short, like she was holding something back. She was hiding something. Then there was her phone. Emma had always been carefree with it, leaving it on the table or handing it to me when she needed me to check something. But now, she kept it close, even taking it into the bathroom with her. If I walked into the room, she would quickly lock the screen or flip it over. "What is up with your phone?" I asked one night, trying to keep my tone light. "Just work stuff," she said without looking at me. Work stuff. That became her go-to answer for everything. Then she started coming home late. At first, it was once or twice a week, and her excuses sounded reasonable. Meetings ran long. She had to finish a project. But over time, her stories stopped adding up. One night, I waited up for her, watching the clock tick past midnight. When she finally walked through the door, she seemed startled to see me still awake. "Long night?" I asked, keeping my voice even though my stomach was twisting. "Yeah," she said, avoiding my gaze. "We had to finish a report and then grab drinks. You know how it is." Except I did not. Emma was never one to grab drinks with coworkers, especially without texting me first. And there was something else. The faint smell of wine on her breath, a drink she rarely touched, and a subtle trace of cologne. Not mine. Not hers. I wanted to believe her, but a nagging voice in the back of my mind told me something was not right. A few weeks later, I noticed other changes. Emma had this glow about her, but it felt different. She smiled more, but it was not her usual bright, carefree smile. It was smaller, almost secretive. Her appetite shifted, and she started craving food she used to hate. At first, I thought it was stress, or maybe some new diet trend. Then it hit me. She might be pregnant. I was ecstatic. Sure, we had not planned for this, but it felt like a sign that our future was coming together. I wanted to wait for her to tell me herself, so I kept quiet, imagining how she would break the news, how we would celebrate, how our lives would change for the better. Then, one night, she finally sat me down. Her hands were trembling, her face pale. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice unsteady. I smiled, thinking she was just nervous. "It is okay," I assured her. "You can tell me anything." She took a deep breath, and then the words came out. "I am pregnant." I felt like I was floating. "That is amazing," I said, reaching for her. But she pulled away, tears streaming down her face. "Daniel," she whispered, "it is not yours." For a moment, I did not understand. The words hung in the air, incomprehensible. Then they hit me, and it felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. "What do you mean it is not mine?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She could not even look at me. "It is Jake's." The world imploded. I stared at her, waiting for her to take it back, to tell me it was a mistake or a cruel joke. But she did not. Emma told me everything, or at least enough to shatter me. She said it started at our engagement party. While I was busy talking to guests, Jake had cornered her. He told her she was making a mistake, that I did not appreciate her, that she deserved more. He played on all her insecurities, planting seeds of doubt until she started believing him. "It just happened," she said, sobbing. "I do not know why I let it." She tried to explain how Jake had promised her everything she thought I could not give: more attention, more affection, a better future. "He made me feel seen," she whispered, her voice breaking. I could not listen anymore. My chest felt like it was caving in. "Pack your bags and leave," I said, my voice cold and unfamiliar. She tried to apologize, tried to explain, but I was not listening. When she walked out the door, I sat in silence, staring at the ruins of the life we had built together. That night I called Jake. He answered on the first ring, like he had been expecting it. "What did you do?" I demanded. His response was casual, like I had just asked him about the weather. "It was a mistake," he said. "It did not mean anything." But when I pressed him further, his tone shifted. "Maybe if you had been a better fiancé, this would not have happened," he said, his words dripping with smugness. I saw red. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to his place, not even thinking about what I would do when I got there. When I arrived, I saw my mother standing on the porch, arms crossed like she had been expecting me. My father stood beside her, looking weary. "We need to talk," Mom said as soon as I stepped out of the car. "I have nothing to say to him," I snapped, nodding toward the house, where Jake was no doubt waiting. But she was not going to let me walk away. "I did not intend for this to happen," she said. "Emma provoked him. You need to forgive him. He is your brother." I stared at her in disbelief. "Forgive him?" I repeated. "He slept with my fiancée. He got her pregnant. He is your brother," she said again, as if that justified everything. "Family comes first." I looked at my dad, hoping, praying for some kind of support, but he just looked away. At that moment, I knew I was alone. After that night, it became clear that my family had already chosen their side, and it was not mine. For days after my confrontation with Jake and my parents, I ignored their calls. At first, I thought they would let it go, but my mother was relentless. She left voicemail after voicemail, her tone shifting between guilt-tripping and outright anger. "Daniel, you are being ridiculous. You are tearing this family apart," she scolded in one. My dad called too, but his messages were softer, almost apologetic. "Your mother is upset. We just want to sit down and talk about this." It was not reassuring. If anything, it made me angrier. I did not need a conversation. I needed them to understand how deeply they had betrayed me. And it was not just them. My mother started rallying the extended family. Before long, aunts and uncles I had not spoken to in years were calling, texting, even leaving comments on my social media posts. They all said the same thing. "You need to forgive Jake. He is your brother. Family is family." I turned on my heel and started walking back toward the building, but Jake's voice stopped me. "Running away again?" "Typical," he said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. I turned back, keeping my distance. "You are violating a court order," I said, my voice steady. "Leave, or I am calling the police." Mom looked offended. "We are just trying to fix this. You are being unreasonable." "There is nothing to fix," I said firmly. "You chose your side. Now deal with the consequences." Jake pushed off the car, taking a step closer. "You are pathetic," he sneered. "You cannot even face your own family." Before I could respond, a coworker walked out and quietly asked if I needed help. I nodded, grateful for the support. Jake muttered something under his breath, but they both left before the situation escalated. That night, I realized I could not stay. The restraining order had given me some protection, but it was not enough. They knew where I lived, where I worked, and they had no intention of leaving me alone. The next day, I made a decision. I was going to leave town, start over somewhere far away from them. Packing up my life was not easy. I sold most of my belongings, keeping only the essentials. As I packed, I could not help but think about all the times I had tried to make things work with my family, the holidays where I felt invisible, the milestones they barely acknowledged, the constant comparisons to Jake. When I sealed the last box, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. I was not just leaving my family behind. I was leaving behind years of hurt and disappointment. Before I left, I called my cousin Katie, one of the few people who had supported me through everything. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "It is a big step." "I am sure," I said. "I cannot keep living like this, Katie. They will never change." She did not argue. "If you need anything, call me," she said. "And do not forget, you deserve better than what they have given you." Her words stayed with me. The day I left, I did not tell anyone except Katie. I packed my car, deleted my old social media accounts, and started driving. When I crossed the state line, I felt an overwhelming sense of freedom. I did not know what the future held, but I knew one thing: it would not include them. Emma's life fell apart faster than I expected. Jake dumped her a few months into the pregnancy, disappearing without even saying goodbye. He left her with no money, no plan, and no support. I did not hear about it directly, of course. I had cut all ties with my family and had no intention of reopening old wounds. But they could not leave me alone. Katie was the first to tell me. "Did you hear about Jake?" she asked during a rare phone call. "No," I said flatly, already dreading what she might say. "He dumped Emma. Just ghosted her. She is devastated. And now her parents have disowned her over the whole thing, said she brought shame to the family." I did not respond. What was there to say? Emma had made her choices, and now she was facing the consequences. But a part of me could not help but feel a flicker of pity. As much as I hated what she had done to me, I would not wish Jake's betrayal on anyone. Katie continued, her voice softer. "She is staying in some cheap motel now, barely making ends meet. Her family will not even talk to her. It is bad, Daniel. I wanted to feel vindicated. I wanted to laugh and say she deserved it. But all I felt was a hollow ache, like the final chapter of a book I never wanted to read. Jake's disappearance did not surprise me. He had never been one to stick around when things got tough. But what did surprise me was how my mother reacted, or rather, how she did not react. She is making excuses for him again, Katie told me during another call, telling everyone he just needs time to figure things out. Can you believe it? Of course I can, I replied bitterly. That is what she has been doing his whole life. But this time, her excuses were not working as well as they used to. Even my dad, who had always been passive, seemed fed up. Katie told me he had started spending more time at work, avoiding the house altogether. Your dad seems miserable, she said. I think he is finally seeing the damage Mom's favoritism has caused. But you know him, he will not say anything. I did not care anymore. I was not interested in what my parents thought or how they coped. They had chosen Jake over me time and time again. Now, they could deal with the consequences. The fact that Emma's family disowned her added another layer to the mess. From what I heard, they were furious when they found out about her affair with Jake. They had been supportive when we got engaged, but once the truth came out, they wanted nothing to do with her. Her dad called her a disgrace, Katie said. Can you imagine hearing that from your own parents? I could. In a way, Emma was experiencing the same kind of rejection I had felt my whole life. The difference was, she had brought it on herself. My mother's guilt-tripping intensified after Jake left Emma. She called from unknown numbers, left voicemails, and even sent emails. You are still her fiancé in a way, one message read. You should be helping her, Daniel. The baby is innocent in all of this. Another email read, family means stepping up, even when it is hard. I raised you better than this. I deleted them without replying. When I continued to ignore her, my mother resorted to sending other relatives after me. Aunts, uncles, even distant cousins I had not spoken to in years, suddenly started calling and texting. You cannot just let Emma go through this alone, one cousin said. She is pregnant, Daniel. Do not be so cold. She is carrying your niece or nephew, another one said. That baby needs a family. They made it sound like I was the villain for staying away. No one seemed to care about what Emma and Jake had done to me. No one wanted to talk about the betrayal, the lies, or the years of favoritism that had led me to cut ties in the first place. Katie, as always, was the only one who saw things clearly. Do not let them guilt you, she said. You did nothing wrong. This is their mess, not yours. Her words were a lifeline. Despite everything, I stood firm in my decision to stay away. I knew that getting involved would only drag me back into the chaos I had fought so hard to escape. Emma's struggles were not my responsibility. Neither was Jake's absence. I kept my focus on rebuilding my life. Therapy helped me work through the lingering anger and resentment. I found peace in the small things, taking my dog, Max, for long walks, exploring my new city, meeting people who knew nothing about my past. Sometimes, late at night, I wondered how things would have been different. If my mother had treated me fairly, if Jake had not betrayed me, if Emma had made different choices. But those thoughts were fleeting. I had learned that dwelling on the past only kept me tethered to it. Emma's story became just another chapter in the long list of reasons why I had to cut ties with my family. I did not take joy in her suffering. But I did not feel obligated to fix it either. Life is about choices. Emma and Jake made theirs, and I made mine. For the first time in my life, I chose myself, and I do not regret it.